Imagine waking up one morning and deciding to challenge the most powerful empire on earth, an empire that ruled nearly a quarter of the world, an empire whose navy controlled the ocean, an empire that had defeated France and emerged as world's greatest superpower. Sounds impossible, doesn't it? Yet exactly 250 years ago, 13 small colonies on the eastern coast of North America did exactly that. They did not only defeated Great Britain, but also gave world a revolutionary idea that government derived their power from people, not from the kings. That means popular sovereignty. This is the story of American Revolution, a revolution that transformed the world history. But every revolution begins with a question: why did Americans rebel against Britain in the first place? To answer that, we need to go back almost 300 years. Hi, I am Tauqeer Zafar, and today on the eve of 250th years of American independence, I'll be speaking on American Revolution. By the 18th century, Britain had established 13 prosperous colonies along the Atlantic coast of North America. These colonies were British in every sense. The people spoke English, they followed British laws, traded with Britain, and proudly considered themselves loyal subjects of British crown. For decades, both Britain and colonies benefited from this relation. Britain followed an economic policy called as mercantilism. Imagine a father who owns a family business. He allows his children to work, but every profit they earn must come back to him. They cannot freely sell their products to anyone else. That was exactly how Britain treated its colonies. The colonies supplied raw materials like tobacco, cotton, timber, rice, etc. Britain turned these raw materials into finished goods and sold them back to colonies at profit. That means colonies were used as the source for raw material and also treated as a market. To make sure the system worked, Parliament passed Navigation Act, which required colonial trade to take place many through British ships. However, Britain made one important mistake. For many years, these laws were not enforced very strictly. This period was known as salutary neglect. During this time, colonies became used to manage their own affairs. They elected their local assemblies, collected taxes, made many decisions without much interference from London. Without realizing it, Britain had taught the colonies how to govern themselves. Everything changed after 7 Years' War, fought between Britain and France from 1756 to 1763. Britain won the war and captured vast territories. Victory made Britain more powerful, but it also made Britain heavily indebted. The government in London now asked a simple question: if we fought this expensive war to protect American colonies, should not the colonies help pay for it? The answer Britain gave would change history forever. Britain believed that the colonies should help repay the cost of 7 Years' War. The colonies did not completely disagree. What they opposed was how Britain was taxing them. In 1765, Parliament passed Stamp Act. This act is a very important act. For the first time, almost every legal document, newspaper, license, and even deck of playing cards had to carry government stamp that required payment. The tax itself was not very high. The real issue was this: who had the right to tax colonies? The colonists had no representative in the British Parliament, so they raised the slogan that would echo throughout the history: no taxation without representation. This slogan becomes the slogan of American Revolution. This slogan has great significance. What is the meaning of this slogan? If you want to tax us, you have to represent us in the British Parliament. Protests spread across colonies. British goods were boycotted. Tax collectors were threatened. The pressure became so intense Britain repealed Stamp Act. But instead of solving the problem, Parliament declared that it still had the right to make laws for the colonies. The conflict had only begun. Over the next few years, British introduced new taxes on everyday item, that means basic utility products like glass, paper, pen, lead, tea. Every new law increased public anger. Then came a tragedy. On 5th March 1770, a tense confrontation broke out between British soldiers and civilians in Boston. Stones were thrown, soldiers panicked, they opened fire. 5 colonists were killed. This incident became famous as Boston Massacre. Across the colonies, newspapers described it as proof that Britain was using force to silence its own people. Trust between the colonies and Britain was rapidly disappearing. 3 years later, Parliament passed the Tea Act. Ironically, it actually made British tea cheaper. But the colonies were no longer protesting the price of tea. They were protesting Britain's right to tax them without their consent. A group of colonists disguised themselves as Native Americans. They quietly boarded 3 British ships anchored in Boston Harbor. Then chest after chest, they threw 342 boxes of tea into the sea. This dramatic protest became to be known as Boston Tea Party. It shocked Britain. King George III and Parliament decided that enough was enough. They responded with harsh punishment. Boston Harbor was closed. The powers of local government were reduced. More British soldiers were sent to maintain order. These measures became known as intolerable acts. But instead of frightening the colonies, they united them. Representatives from colonies gathered in Philadelphia for the first Continental Congress. For the first time, they spoke with one voice. They still hoped for peace, but they also began preparing for war. British troops marched towards towns of Lexington and Concord to seize colonial weapons. Waiting for them were local militia. A shot rang out. No one knows who fired it, but that single bullet changed history. It became known as shot heard around the world. The American Revolutionary War had begun. The question was no longer whether the colonies would resist. The question now was whether they could defeat the most powerful empire on the earth. The war had begun, but defeating Britain was going to be incredibly difficult. The British Army was one of the best trained forces in the world. Its navy controlled the ocean, and the colonies had limited money, few weapons, and an inexperienced army. At this crucial moment, the colonies found their leader, George Washington, who was appointed as Commander-in-Chief of Continental Army. He was not a brilliant battlefield tactician in every campaign, but possessed extraordinary courage, discipline, determination. Even after repeated defeats, he refused to surrender. His resilience kept revolutionary cause alive. Then came a moment that changed public opinion forever. Thomas Paine published a small pamphlet called as Common Sense. Written in simple language, it argued that it was absurd for a distant island to rule an entire continent. The pamphlet spread like wildfire. For thousands of ordinary colonists, the goal was no longer reform, it was complete independence. Representative of 13 colonies adopted Declaration of Independence drafted by Thomas Jefferson, and that was the beginning of American War of Independence. The document announced that colonies were now free and independent states. It declared that all men are created equal, that people possess natural rights such as life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. and that government derived their power from the consent of governed. These ideas, inspired by Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke, challenged the very foundation of monarchy. But declaring independence was easier than securing it. The American victory convinced France that Britain could be defeated. France entered the war in 1778, providing soldiers, money, weapons, most importantly, a powerful navy. Later, Spain and Dutch Republic also joined the conflict against Britain. What had started as colonial rebellion and now became an international war. American forces under George Washington, supported by French troops and the French Navy, surrounded the British Army led by General Cornwallis, the same Cornwallis who came to India as Governor General of Bengal. With no hope of escape, Cornwallis surrendered. It was the beginning of the end. 2 years later, the Treaty of Paris 1783 officially recognized independence of United States of America. But the greatest victory of American Revolution was not just military, it was ideology. The ideology that inspired American Revolution. For the first time in the modern history, a colony had successfully overthrown a powerful European empire and established a republic based on popular sovereignty, constitutional government, and individual rights. Its influence spread beyond North America. The ideals of American Revolution, the liberty and equality inspired French Revolution. It not only influenced French Revolution, but also has influenced independence movement across Latin America and encouraged democratic struggles in many parts of the world. 3 key points in American Revolution. First, the American Revolution was driven by economic grievances, especially Britain's mercantilist policy and taxation. Second, it was deeply influenced by Enlightenment ideas such as liberty, equality, and natural rights. Third, its impact was global, inspiring future revolution and shaping the modern democratic world. Today, as United States celebrates 250th years of its Declaration of Independence, the American Revolution reminds us of timeless lessons. Empires may possess wealth, armies, power, but ideas have a strength that no empire can permanently suppress. The demand for liberty, representation, and self-government that echoed throughout the streets of Boston and Philadelphia continues to resonate across the world even today. And that is why American Revolution remains one of the greatest turning points in the human history. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this journey through history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Happy 250th Independence Day to United States of America.